folks, welcome back to Game Geeks. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's episode is going to be a little bit longer than average, although not as long as, say, our 30-minute love letter to Doctor Who. This one is going to be talking about the Fate core system and a couple of its supplements. The thing that you should note about this is Fate core was initially produced as a Kickstarter by Evil Hat Games that went pretty insane, in my opinion, and has ended up producing a lot of really interesting material that came out of that. So the first few books we're going to talk about are the Fate Core Rulebook, the Fate Core Toolkit, and Fate Accelerated. Now, the rulebook itself, Fate derives from Fudge, which is an older system, and we've reviewed Fates in various incarnations several times. I think the earliest goes back to our Spirit of the Century review, all the way back when we had our guest host, Isaias Acosta. So, Is, if you're watching, hi, and I miss you. So, what do you get with Fate? Well, Fate itself is, I don't really want to call it rules light, because to be honest with you, it's really not. It's just rules medium in a very different focus than what we're accustomed to as gamers. Fate lacks your standard attributes, strength, dex, con, or any of its variations or synonyms. What you have is your character is defined by aspects. These are short, pithy sentences, sometimes funny, sometimes not, that express some aspect of your character. Something like dashing Star Knight, or wizard for hire, or dangerous guy with a gun, or Luxon warrior. There's a variety for you to choose from there. Now, the aspects are broken down as presented in Fate Core into 5. You get 5 aspects, but you could get more if you wanted to. The one thing I want to say early, before I get too much into an aspects discussion here, is the fact that Fate Core openly tells you, change this stuff around, move it around, increase the skills, decrease the skills, give more aspects, give more fate points, have higher refresh, more stunts, whatever you need to do to make this game yours, which is a little bit difficult to wrap your brain around from time to time, simply because we're used to very set, discrete rules that tell you how to do things in a given situation. And Fate tends to take a much more open, squishy approach to that. So back to the aspects. You get 5 of them. The first one is called your high concept. The second one is your trouble. They sort of define who you are or who your character is in terms, in broad strokes about what they are and what they can do. So let's make up a character as we sit here discussing it. Let's make, let's make a character called Joel D. Ford. What's the D stand for? I'll never tell. So with Joel Ford, your high concept might be something like adventurous high school guidance counselor, or stalwart history teacher, or ambitious academic team coach. All of those could work, but we'll go with the guidance counselor for our example. So you've got adventurous high school guidance counselor. Okay, so there you go. That's your high concept. Now that can tell you quite a bit about your character from the outset and some of what they're good at, what they would be able to do. Trouble, that is the thing that plagues your character. It's probably the number one most important thing that's going to be hindering your character or making their life more interesting in the long run. So you could put, has a crappy friend for Joel D. Ford. So there you go. There's his trouble aspect. That's what kind of makes his life more interesting. Then the other 3 are sort of other things that can describe your character. So you might put experienced stage actor, really good academic team captain, and devoted father. Devoted husband and father, that's better. So there are your 5 aspects. Those are the things that define your character. It then goes into skills. Now, what they've done is they've taken a pretty long list of skills you've seen in previous Fate iterations, like Spirit of the Century, Dresden Files, Bulldogs, any of the Star Blazers and Glare games, and condense them down into a basic list of 18. Now, with those 18, you get a standard skill pyramid that you have to use to define, the idea being that you can't have all your points in one particular skill. So you build your pyramid of 1 great, 2 good, 3 fair, and 4 average skills, which are +4, +3, +2, or +1 respectively. And so for our character of Joel, because he's a guidance counselor, you might have his high skills being empathy, rapport, and let's say deceive, in case he wants to convince anyone they need to go into the army. The remaining block can be broken down as you see fit, unless you absolutely have the need to make this guy a ninja or a master gunfighter. Stunts are specific applications of your skills that let you do different things with them than they normally would. Now, there are a block of definitions of a stunt. I won't be able to go into them here, but they do everything from allow you to replace one skill for another for a specific kind of action, or get a +2 to your skill in certain circumstances. That's really it. You've got a fate point mechanic, and then there's understanding all of what the fate points can do and how the game works. But there you go. Folks, the thing about this, in addition to its modularity, is the fate character sheet can fit on an index card. I've done it. It's a large index card because I like to give a lot of room, but if you feel like compacting it, you can get it all onto a small index card. Now, with fate, you get a lot of examples on how the game runs. You get the 4 applications of skill, which are overcome, create an advantage, attack, or defend. Not all skills can be used in all situations. You get the idea of stress tracks, and then the rest of it is examples on how to build a character, how to build an adventure, how to build a campaign, and specific sort of like, I think they're called extras, which are specific applications of the game into other areas. Now, this is where Fate Core ends. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a pretty hefty book. It's 310 pages. The hard copy is a smaller, almost digest size, which makes it very easy to smuggle into your bag, take to work, or take to the bathroom with you if you're really bored. With Fate Core, you also get the Fate System Toolkit. Now, the Fate System Toolkit, the back says rules, glorious rules, and to be honest with you, it's less rules, in my opinion, and more other examples, other ways you can shoehorn the game into other situations, etc. Probably the most interesting for me are the inclusion of races as a skill. So you could say that, if you really wanted to, that you are a great level +4 elf. And therefore, all of the things that elves will be able to do, you can do really well, as opposed to a great +1 elf who has their foci in other areas of their life. The most of the book is taken up in different ways of approaching magic, technology, basically more of those extras that we've already talked about. There are some very interesting applications of magic here. You have things like the storm calling skills, void callers, which are touching things man was not meant to know, basic low-level magic, which is almost like voodoo cursing. And finally, and the one that I had the most trouble wrapping my brain around was the idea of the viziers, which is sort of you are touched by a god or some other large deific being that grants you almost magical applications of some of your skills. I kind of choked on that until I realized that's a really good way of modeling Exalted in Fate if you so desired. Now, there are 2 other books that we're not going to talk about in this space because of time, and those are the Fate Worlds books. Those include Worlds on Fire and Worlds in Shadow. Those are specific small campaign settings varying between probably 30 to 50 pages that give you not only a campaign setting, but rather specific implementations and some very clever ways to slot the rules into other areas you might not think. As I said, that will be for another review. The last piece of Fate that I want to discuss today is Fate Accelerated. Fate Accelerated came out of their Kickstarter, which is a smaller version, 50 pages, of the rules. Now, a lot of it is still there, aspects, stunts, stress tracks, consequences, etc. But what they've done in an effort to make it kid-friendly, which works really well in my opinion, is breaking down the skills into other, approaches, if you'll pardon the pun, because that's exactly what they call them in this, is they're no longer skills, they are approaches. It's how your character does things. And the approaches, which require a bit more explanation because we all know what deceive means, or we all know what shoot means as gamers. The approaches, however, take a different point of view to this. They include careful, clever, flashy, forceful, quick, and sneaky. And these are different ways that you can get your character to do certain things. So they can attack, but is it a flashy attack like a fencer, a forceful attack like, say, Conan, a careful attack like an assassin, or a sneaky attack like a thief? Additionally, it streamlines a lot of the rules down to make it very, in my opinion, kid accessible. This puts it on the level of Mermaid Adventures and Camp Myth, it being a very kid-accessible gateway game for people to really start to come into this hobby. As I've mentioned before, as we gamers are getting older, our children are becoming more and more involved in the hobby or want to be more involved, and these are great ways to get them started because as much as I like the line, I would not start my 10-year-old daughter on Pathfinder. I think that would make her eyes bleed a little bit. Even with the beginner box, I think it would be a little too much for them to keep juggling and keep all those balls in the air. Where Fate Accelerated would be a much better entryway for them to get into the hobby. For Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Good day and good gaming.